This is Tales from the Pros, where business leaders and influencers share their stories of inspiration, struggles, and successes. And I'm your host, Michael Giorgio. Hey everyone, welcome to Tales from the Pros. And this is Michael Giorgio, your host and co-founder of Imagine Innovation. My amazing guest with me here today is the CEO of Veem, the global B2B payment network with over 300,000 small and mid-sized businesses around the globe. Veem provides simple, secure, and trackable payments to over 100 countries. Since the company's founding in 2014, Veem is backed by Goldman Sachs, Google Ventures, Silicon Valley Bank, and many, many others. He is an innovator, visionary, and enjoys launching new products in domestic, US, and international markets, and building companies through disruptive tech and global strategies. And he is the author of Small Business in a Big World, a comprehensive guide to doing international business. Please welcome the awesome Marwan Forzley. Marwan, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, the honor is all mine. So Marwan, as I told you before, this is a business storytelling podcast, and it's I think it's very important for you as not only the CEO, but for you even just as a human being, right? To just talk to the audience and kind of tell them really, where you came from and how you got to where you are today at such an amazing company as Veem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I started Veem in 2014. I used to run e-commerce for Western Union, got into Western Union through an acquisition of a company called eBillMe, which was a payment option at the checkout that connected shopping carts to online banking systems. And prior to that, I was in another startup that ended up in Nokia in the voice over IP space. So I pretty much my entire career has been focused on building startups, and essentially they end up with larger companies. So that's been the bulk of my career. We started Veem on a very basic idea that you gotta simplify payments for SMBs, both domestic and cross-border, both payables and receivables. It's almost like whatever you need to do your payments as a business, we'll do it for you, all centered around the same principle. It's got to be really simple, easy to work with, highly supported, transparent pricing, and just a delight to deal with. That's the entire premise of why we started this company.
I love it. And just from doing some research on you before, so you're in California now, you're in the Silicon Valley area. Okay. And so You're from Canada, is that right? Near
I'm Canadian. Yes, I'm in Ottawa. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I'm Canadian that ended up going to the US as part of my previous company. So we transitioned the company to New York, and then on the acquisition by Western Union, I actually ended up also moving to the San Francisco office.
Love it. Yeah, I actually lived in Brampton, Ontario for 7 years.
Yes.
I'm a Canadian citizen and I'm a US citizen, but I'm 100% Greek Cypriot.
Okay.
So I'm actually from Cyprus. My mom and dad, everyone's there, but I've kind of lived everywhere, and I was born in London as well. So been around.
You're like the United Nations. Yeah, a whole bunch of countries in one person.
Yeah, that's cool. And so Marwan, when it comes to when you started Veem, and it was, you said 2014, right?
Right.
I started, yeah. So when you came up with the idea, and I know that you talked about simplicity, and you were solving probably a lot of different problems.
Mm-hmm.
How did you really establish a market fit for that product? Because I know you mentioned simplicity, but how did you know, this is the product that I really want to pursue? This is the product that is going to make a lot of money. It's going to provide a lot of impact to many small and medium-sized businesses. How did you know that it would get adopted so well, and just, and which allows you to thrive and scale and operate it?
Mm-hmm. There's 125 trillion in dollars that circulate around the world, all on bank wire. And If you look at the structure of that market, the bulk of the money moves through banks on bank wire. So when we first started the company, we're like, it's a different era now. We got to be able to simplify cross-border payments. We started from that angle that, when you're doing a payment to Mexico or Brazil or India or Philippines or wherever you're sending money to, it really should be as simple as a domestic payment, as simple as paying for coffee. You shouldn't be able to distinguish the difference actually between them, whether I'm paying for coffee or I'm paying for my supplier in Mexico. It's the same thing. And as simple as it sounds, it's actually a bunch of headaches, because to do that, you got to have the ability to operate in multiple countries, multiple currencies. You got to be able to have compliance infrastructure and regulation, and the regulation know-how in multiple markets: domestic, USD, Canada, Australia, Europe. You're learning about all these markets. The other thing that's important is understanding how to build products that are global in nature, that a customer in Germany or a customer in Pakistan would be able to figure out how to use the product. It's not heavy to use, it's simple to use. So these are all components that you have to assemble together, put together to run a service that's simply enough for users to use it. So it's a lot of practice, it's a lot of iterations, it's a lot of refinement on the initial ideas that you start with. It's a lot of conviction that if you solve the problem, people will like it. And when they like it, they bring other customers to the table, which is what we've seen today. When customers like something and they find it simple to use, they go get other customers they work with who then come and join Veem. And that's a good chunk of the growth we've seen in the company.
And in the way beginning, when you started Veem, was the adoption rate for user acquisition, was it really high, really quickly when you launched it? Let's just say when you launched it in beta, was it just just boom, boom, boom? Was it just very quick adoption, or was it kind of like, did you scale it? Did you kind of see it grow over time as you increased your marketing, your budget, your marketing strategies and tactics? Then it started to drive in more users, or was it kind of just kind of took off? Sometimes with these products, they take off with like their virality or their referral. You mentioned like, they'll refer one customer to the other. How did it kind of happen for you guys?
Well, it's a bit of both, because like nothing builds overnight. It takes time to scale and build these things. But you got something when you got customers and you're not sure where they came from, because that's like one thing that was super interesting in the early days. We would get customers, and nobody really sure like who got them in, because at the time it's like, what do you know about this customer? Why nobody's spoken to them? Like, how did they start using the product? Turns out that somebody else got them in, told them about Veem, and they started using Veem. And so it's a little bit of both. It's like you need to have that virality, that delight, so people like the product and they go tell their customers that, hey, use this product, it's good for you. But at the same time, you got to be patient with it, because this stuff it's not like, first of all, it's not a walk in the park. This stuff is complex because you're dealing with regulated services. And then two, it just takes time to build up the customer base, to build up the experience, to build up the know-how, the reliability, the security, because you're dealing with people's money. You want to make sure that everything is up to snuff before you actually start moving their money. So it's a combination of the two together that you need to have at the same time.
I can't imagine the amount of iterations that you had and just the amount of testing, right, that you had to go through for the product. Because right, if you think about it, right, you're dealing with someone's money. Sometimes we don't think about that on the other side, right? On the customer side, you don't think like, oh, what is Veem going through to get us this product, right? This is really working. This is making it easy for me to pay my developers overseas, right? It's easy to do that. But you don't realize the customers sometimes don't realize how much work it takes for you as the company to provide this product, the service. It's crazy, so it's good for you to give them that perspective,
Yeah, let's say let's say, Michael, you have a developer you're working with, pick a country, Brazil, and you want to pay that developer. So for you as a user, it should be really simple. I pick my developer in Brazil. Here's the amount of US dollar I'm sending, send. That's it. That's all you want the experience to be. But on the back end, I gotta have infrastructure to pull money from your bank account, gotta have infrastructure to convert it to real from USD, gotta make sure I understand what is required in the US side, what's required in Brazil, gotta figure out how to communicate to your counterparty in Brazil, make sure that they're supported, make sure that they got their money on time. So when you actually start parsing through the amount of infrastructure needed to move that money, as simple as this payment to your developer in Brazil, there's a significant amount of infrastructure behind the scenes to get it to happen. Just like when you order Uber, for example, and you see the car coming to pick you up, but there's quite a bit of infrastructure built up to do just that behind the scenes. So the final output is you see the car coming to pick you up, but behind the scenes, there's like people and people, engineering, operating, supporting, servicing, same thing here, but for money.
Yeah, yeah. And when I guess I don't know the exact years that that Veem got funding. I know you guys got funding from a lot of different investors, right? Different seed rounds and all that. But was it immediate for Veem? So when you built, did you have to build the product first and then have investors look at it, because they can play with something that's tangible, right? They can play with an actual system, and then they kind of write that check? Or is it just way down the road when you're already operating, you already have revenue coming in? Because I think I asked that question because I think sometimes startups have the wrong idea when they are seeking funding. It just in many different aspects, right? I've dealt with hundreds of startups where sometimes they just have an idea. And some of them are really, really good ideas, but they don't have any platform that they've built yet. They haven't actually built any sort of tangible product for investors to look at and play with. So for you at Veem, did you already have the product kind of built, and then investors just kind of came along, and then which allowed you to, obviously, you had budgets and funding for different reasons, of course, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's different styles and different processes, different situations, and different types of investors. So, when I first started the company, we built up the first version of the product on our own. And then once we had customers and revenue, we started getting institutional investors. Other entrepreneurs do it differently. If you can get institutional investment early, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not the best. It just depends on what you're trying to build. But you want to be in a position where once you get institutional money, you have revenue, you have customers, you want to have the customers stand up and say, I believe in this, I like it. So the more you can build on your own to verify that there is going to be demand and there is a fit between what you're building and the customer. Once you have customers that are willing to say, hey, this is a good service, I'm going to use it, I'm going to recommend it, you got something. Then that's a good basis to go get money, to get institutional money. Now, it's easier said than done, because sometimes to get to that milestone, you need money to get there. So you kind of have to either figure out a way to get, what they call angel money or friends and family to help you get there, or you simply bootstrap and try to do as much as you can on your own to get it to a stage where it's built up, and then you go from there.
What are your thoughts on bootstrapping a business? Do you think it's just you think it's a lot harder to grow the company?
Well, it's a longer.
People say yes or no, so that's why I asked that.
It's a longer process. It takes a longer time. But before venture capital existed, all businesses were bootstrapped. You had to find a way to generate revenue early on and keep it going on your own for a long period of time before you got to a stage where either the bank, lent you money, or you got investors to put money in, depending on the type of business you have. It's easier to raise money. It feels this way, that it's easier to raise money and build up something and go with it. You gotta remember that depending on what you're trying to build, some products are suitable for venture money, some are not. So it's a combination of what is it that you're trying to sell and build, and how much are you able to do on your own? Can you get to a stage where you have customers, you have revenue, and then raise capital? I would say that's probably the better formula.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that from numerous people. It's always easier when you have money coming in, right? Because the investors are gonna when they're vetting you, they're auditing you, right? And they're doing their due diligence. They are looking at how can they get a return on their investment quickly, right? Quicker,
Also,
sooner rather than later.
yeah, and also you're taking venture capital money to accelerate. If you're not in a position to accelerate, it ends up not helpful because you're sitting on this money you're not sure what to do with. So you want to make sure that once you get institutional capital like venture capital money, you're in a position to go, because you gotta run with it. So that's another dynamic. Like sometimes if you do it too early or prematurely, um, it may end up backfiring on you.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really great advice. It's important for people to understand that they have to have a plan and strategy in place, and not even
Yeah.
just a plan and strategy. They have to be able to execute, which means they have to have the resources, right? They have to have the people, the power of the people behind to be able to execute that acceleration.
Well, you kind of have to be ready for it.
Yeah.
It's like if you take money prematurely, you run the risk of not sure how to execute on that money, which becomes problematic. If you wait too long, though, on the other hand, it's also not that good, especially if the market is hot and there's appetite for what you're building in the market. So then bootstrapping is not that healthy because you're constraining it. Money opens it up. So it just depends on the market you're in, on the product that you're selling, on the overall macro conditions of the market. That's all plays into it.
Yeah. And it's a perfect segue into what I wanted to discuss next with you, Marwan, is just like your experience, all the years of your experience in just in business and entrepreneurship. Um, where do you see as like the key factors that set a business up for success? So from a startup phase to
Mhm.
an operating and scaling company phase, what are some pieces of advice or just things that you feel that are really important and powerful to go from here to here?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. One is you want to make sure what you understand what's differentiated about what you're building, what's really unique. Um, and what's unique and not quickly accessible by the customers you're trying to service. Is it difficult for them to access capabilities that you're producing? Because if you can make what you're producing available to the masses, then it connects and you're off. You have a good start. Um, the other thing that's important is persistence. Like there's there are some stories where people hit it off in a couple of years, it's like a big business, but the bulk of the businesses are ideas that take time to develop, take quite a bit of persistence, quite a bit of know-how, and the ability to weather storms along the way. Not everything's going to work out. And so the ability to recover from setbacks is something that is important for the entrepreneur to make sure not only just the founder or the CEO or the entrepreneur, it's just the team, the entire team. There's going to be setbacks along the way. And so you got to be able to be resilient to that. That's a key part of the success as well. It's a combination of resiliency, persistence, being the right team at the right time, having the right product. When I say the right product, differentiated solutions that the customer feels that this is different from what I've done in the past.
Yeah, I have a saying, and I always say this: if it was that easy, then everybody would be doing it.
Sure, yeah.
I know it
Yeah.
sounds ironic and like kind of cliche and everything, but it really is true, right? I mean, if it was that easy, right? Because it's hard, it's really tough. I mean, I think in the outside world, when I mean outside in terms of, from people who don't own a business or who or don't have they don't have all the responsibilities that you as a CEO may have. They see it very differently, and sometimes they see companies like yourself, like, oh, getting all the seed money and all this, revenue and all this stuff, but they don't realize the grind and the fire and the tenacity and the hard work, the perseverance, like you talked about, just everything, all these different elements that really take a toll on you and the company, and just it's hard work. It's a lot
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah, like there's like the saying goes, there's never a dull moment in startups or newer companies. You kind of have to make sure that you have a healthy degree of persistence, resiliency, and the ability to just keep going. Some days are good, some days are not the best, but you just keep going. That's a good chunk of what makes startups successful.
Roll with the punches. Just got to keep moving
Roll
forward.
with the punches.
Yeah, love it. And Marwan, you mentioned before, even just like challenges and obstacles, and I'll talk about that just for a few minutes. When it comes to you building and growing this company, or even just your past in entrepreneurship and just growing businesses, what are some of some of the toughest obstacles or challenges that you've faced, you've experienced, that were really a test, like just a really big test, and how did you overcome them? Because we all know that, we just talked about it, right? It's really, really tough. So, kind of what are a few things that you went through that were just really, really difficult?
I think understanding what you can do in a short period of time has always been the most challenging thing for growth startups, because you have a limited amount of runway, and you're trying to pack as much as you can during that time so that you go to the next phase of the development. And so one of the harder things to do is figure out, okay, how many months do I have in front of me, and what do I need to do to get where? And it's really challenging because especially in the early days, because you have so many ideas on what you want to do and what you can do, and customers tell you, I want this and I want that, and the ability to narrow down things to concrete steps that you execute on, so that you have enough build up from the phase you're in to the next one, so that you raise money again to carry you to the next phase. These are all important decisions that define the type of success you're going to have. And that balancing act between runway, what you're going to be able to do, and how much do you have to do to get to the next milestone. These are like tough decisions that you have to go through as you build up and scale. And the faster you go, the bigger the decisions and the more impactful decisions become, because you're dealing with it's like you're driving a fast car. If you're doing a turn and you take the wrong turn, that's hard to recover from when you're flying with the car. So
Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that, because you're trying to figure out how to balance the various things at the same time, and that's very specific to venture capital funded businesses. More traditional businesses have different dynamics to them, in that you don't have the same time pressures that you typically do when you're dealing with a venture capital funded business.
Yeah, I can imagine the amount of pressure. You gotta make sure that kind of you're ready to go for the next phase. It's I can't imagine the amount of planning and just the type of execution you guys have to go through. But I guess it kind of comes with the territory, right?
It does. Planning, thinking, simulating different things, talking to different team members. I mean, it's an ongoing process that you keep iterating on.
Right. And Marwan, with what you're seeing now, with just your area of payment systems and even just
Yeah.
technology in a general sense, technology. Where do you see it going? Because things are evolving like crazy, and just the world is nuts, right? It's just it's going in so many different directions. There's a lot of money circulation, but there's also just a lot of I'll say craziness for now. It's just a lot going on in the world, and a lot of good as well. A lot of good as
Yeah.
well.
Well, the way I see it is basically if you think of in the world of tech, which is a fast moving world, fintech is an area that's going to see significant growth and changes for the foreseeable future, because that's an area that have not seen innovation for a very long period of time. And it's been bubbling for a while. It's sort of been heating up. And now it's like, erupting. I mean, it's like, it's a hot market to be in. And within the world of fintech, because fintech is multiple things. I mean, you got payments, you got lending, you got mortgages, you got security and fraud, and there's all kinds of sub-segments within that world. Payments in particular is also probably one of the hottest segments in already a hot segment, which is fintech. And it has to do again with all the changes that are going on to the systems to make it so that the experience is up to date. It's it's a modern experience compared to what you're used to in the past. The other thing that's important, because as we increasingly live in an online world with COVID and with payments becoming part of everything you do, payments is getting embedded into shopping, into trade finance, into trade in general. It's an application that gets plugged into all kinds of other applications, and so it makes it. That's why there's a sizzle to it, because it's something that's utility, but that utility is strategic because everybody counts on it functioning to be able to conduct basic commerce. So it's a super important concept to get right, and that's why it's a hot area right now. It's an area that's going to stay like this for a while. It's going to see innovation for a long period of time before we see other areas emerge that are more significant. But it's an exciting time to be in fintech in general. It's an exciting time to be in payments in particular. Just so much is going on and so much is happening. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it seems like with a lot of these different SaaS systems, I think from what I'm noticing is personalization is very important. You touched on simplicity, keeping
Yeah.
things very, very simple. I think people are tired of dealing with cluttered systems, clunky systems,
Yeah.
unintuitive. We just don't have time for it. People are just tired of it. They want something very simple they can use. And as I mentioned, personalization and also security, making sure that things are secure. And I know you guys have taken care of that,
Yeah.
Security aspect of it. So all those things are obviously very, very important. But
Yeah, absolutely.
no, that's great. Uh, and just real quick, Marwan, in your experience with being a business leader, and a leader in general for this company and even your previous companies, what are your thoughts on what it really takes to be a strong business leader? Because I think the word leadership's thrown around a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always good to ask people who are living it and doing it and breathing it,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's written on this topic, books and books. I'd say like one thing that I noticed that is maybe helpful here that you won't find necessarily in books, but it's a good experience to go through. Like companies are like, I call companies, they're like kids. They're like human beings. They evolve, and just the way the human life goes from being an infant to toddler to teenage years to adulthood to later in life. Different phases have different needs, and so companies are like that. The early days when you start a company are different than when you have 10 employees, which is different than when you have 100, which is different when you have 1,000. So with every phase, it has its own challenges, and part of the key thing is to understand what are the key things to figure out in each stage of the life cycle of the business. It's just like having kids. You know, if you have a kid that's 2 years old, you gotta essentially deal with the kid. If they want to, you know, eat with their hand and they're 2 years old, I mean, that's acceptable. It's actually really cute. If you have a teenager doing the same thing, you'd be like, okay, well, what are you doing? You have a plate and you have knife and fork, and that's what you should be doing. And so it's the same thing in business. Like, you know, different stages of life have different needs, and being able to recognize that and adapt the processes and tools to the stages you're in is something that is important skill set to learn along the way.
Love it. Love it. And if Marwan, just, you know, looking at your story, you know, on a career or even just life perspective, how would you define your story in one word, real quick?
I'd say basically persistence. Really, it's just you have an idea, you understand the vision of what needs to be done, but nothing happens on its own. You gotta be really persistent to get it to the stage where people understand what you're delivering. They experience it, they find it different than what they have access to, they appreciate it, they tell other people about it, but all that requires a high degree of persistence in order to get there.
Amazing. Marwan, thank you so much. And I know everyone can find your company. It's at www.veem.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Awesome.
Thank
Marwan,
you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Michael Giorgio, until it's from the pros, and until next time. Thanks, guys. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and also follow our social media. There are links somewhere around here, but we really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for all the support, and I'm going to be giving you awesome content continuously, and we look forward to seeing you soon.